to this week's Money Metals podcast, helping gold and silver investors during these turbulent times. Now, this week's market wrap with commentary and analysis from Money Metals Exchange, the company named Best Overall Precious Metals Dealer by Investopedia.
Welcome to this week's Market Wrap podcast. I'm Mike Leeson. Coming up, we'll hear an interesting interview with the newest addition to MoneyMetals.com's content team, columnist and gold market analyst Yan Nieuwenhuis. Join Jan and Mike Maharrey as they break down the latest on gold, why the Chinese are so secretive about their gold accumulation strategy, and what it all means for markets. Jan also talks about the U.S. government's gold, the history of the audits that have taken place on that gold over the years, and some very interesting anomalies regarding the containers held inside our nation's bullion depository and what he's found out there. So be sure to stick around for this fascinating conversation with a man who has dug deeper than just about anyone into the amount of gold flowing around the globe and what's behind it all. Yan Nieuwenhuis coming up after this week's market update. Well, despite soft landing narratives in the media, bullish fervor on Wall Street, and a rising U.S. dollar versus foreign currencies, the precious metals markets continue to rip higher. On Thursday, gold prices closed above the $2,700 level for the first time ever. As of this Friday recording, the monetary metal sports a spot price of $2,728 an ounce and is up about $40 or 1.5% for the week. The S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrials also managed to push to new records this week. Investors seem totally unconcerned about lofty valuations, risks to the economy, and the potential for political turmoil next month. Stock market bulls have certainly done well for themselves. Since the pandemic shakeout of 2020, U.S. stock indexes have clobbered the returns on bonds and cash. These returns are far less impressive, however, when measured against gold. In fact, the S&P 500 has lost value year-to-date in terms of real money. Both gold and silver are outperforming equities, a fact that isn't broadcast widely to mainstream investors. Yet if gold's record bull run is being downplayed, silver's recent strength is flying almost completely under the radar of the financial media. The silver market rallied to a multi-year high last month before suffering a bit of a setback in early October. But now silver shows a weekly gain of 4.1% to bring spot prices to $32.98 an ounce. A break above $33 could send silver running toward $35 and then $40. Turning to the platinum group metals, platinum is gaining 2.4% to trade at $1,025. And finally, palladium is up 0.7% in this week's trading to come in at $1,112 per ounce. In other news, the sound money movement continues to make inroads both legislatively at the state level as well as in the national discourse. The efforts of the Sound Money Defense League, Money Metals Exchange, and our customers have helped push several states over the past few years to end taxation on bullion purchases, with some taking further steps towards recognizing gold and silver as legal tender. Meanwhile, harsh economic realities have left millions of Americans frustrated with the prevailing fiscal and monetary regime. Inflation has been steadily eating away at Americans' hard-earned wealth in recent years. They aren't buying the narrative now being spun by Federal Reserve mouthpieces that price stability is in sight, nor do they believe official government statistics on inflation reflect the full realities of rising costs of living. For these reasons, the inherent flaws of fiat currency are becoming clearer to more people, as is the need for sound money reforms. One prominent advocate of sound money now making waves is Judy Shelton. She has served as an economic advisor to former President Donald Trump. Shelton was also nominated by Trump to a seat on the Federal Reserve Board before her nomination was narrowly derailed in the Senate. She is now out with a new book called Good as Gold: How to Unleash the Power of Sound Money. She appeared recently on Fox Business with Charles Payne.
You've always talked about groceries and gold exchanges, haven't you?
Well, I think groceries are probably the most personal index that people refer to, because then when they hear a government official or even Chair Powell at the Federal Reserve talk about wages having kept up with inflation, I think it comes across as, are you going to believe me or your own lying eyes?
Yeah.
Because they really experience the inflation when they go to the grocery store. And gold, that's an interesting one, because we now see people buying gold at Costco. in massive quantities. And I think that that's kind of a link to reality for a lot of people. So gold is kind of a surrogate for the real economy.
It's not clear whether Judy Shelton would have a role in a potential second Trump administration, but Trump has made tackling inflation a key part of his campaign. And he has strongly hinted that anti-establishment Democrat turned independent Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would have a place in his administration. RFK Jr. has focused heavily on policies that he thinks could make America healthy again. He also criticized the fiat currency system. He proposes replacing the arbitrary decrees of central bankers as backing for the currency with gold, silver, and other hard assets. Of course, gold itself is and will remain money, regardless of what direction U.S. fiscal and monetary policy heads in the years ahead. Well, now, without further delay, let's get right to our exclusive interview with a highly regarded gold analyst and a wonderful recent addition to the Money Metals research and reporting team.
Greetings, I'm Mike Maharrey, a reporter and analyst here at Money Metals, and I'm here today with Yan Nieuwenhuis. Over the last 10 years, Jan has devoted himself to gold market research, and he has become internationally recognized as a top expert in that field. And we are also very privileged to have Jan working on our writing team here at Money Metals, and you can find some of his work over at moneymetals.com/news. How you doing today, Jan?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I am doing very well, and I'm really excited to finally get to talk to you. We've been talking on chat for a while, but really happy that you've joined the team here at Money Metals and appreciate your insights and your work.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to join the team. And everything up until now, the articles and the teamwork has been great. So I'm looking forward to continuing this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were originally in the movie industry, as I understand it. I think a sound engineer, if I remember correctly. How did you get from movie industry to gold analysis?
Oh, well, I was a sound engineer, and in the movie industry, I was working there for I don't know how many years at that point. It was, but I can remember in 2009, the great financial crisis struck the movie industry in the Netherlands. So, it first broke out in the US in 2008, and in 2009 it was just, there was zero work in the movie industry in the Netherlands. Just everybody was sitting at home, making up, small movies to make just for fun, and we would come together and record some stuff because we were bored. Mm-hmm. And I was like, for me, economics was always a bit of a strange subject. I can remember my father used to tell me about it. I was actually quite interested in it, but later on, I thought it's also abstract. And sometimes I heard on the news, the economy is shrinking, or we are in a recession. And then, I would look outside the window, and I was like, I don't see anything, right? So yeah. It was a bit abstract for me. But then, as you get older, I got more interested in intellectual things. So anyway, in 2009, I started picking up books about economics. I wanted to know, what caused this, and I started reading, and I became obsessed, to tell you the truth, about economics. And I came to gold. The first things I read were blogs like Zero Hedge and very biased blogs, but nonetheless, Austrian economics, things like that, and pretty soon I realized, if economics is about scarcity, about how to allocate scarce resources, and money is not scarce, then maybe there's a future in money that is scarce and has an unbeatable track record, which is gold. So anyway, I started to invest a little bit in gold and reading more about it. And then a few years later, I was up and running again as a sound engineer, but I got a knee surgery, and then I got some chronic pain, weird disease, and I couldn't do my work anymore. So I started researching and writing about gold just for fun, actually. And then Yeah, I can remember it was, I had a sort of a scoop about the Chinese gold market, about, how it all worked and what SG withdrawals were a very new thing at the time. Nobody in the West kind of knew about it. I started writing about it, and I had a few sources in China that helped me a lot. I really owe a lot to those people. And I started a blog, and I sent my information, my analysis to a lot of economists and gold commentators, and they were like, "Yeah, okay, but who are you?" And then I can remember at an LBMA conference, I think it was early 2014, the president of the Shanghai Gold Exchange made a speech and was pretty much confirming everything I had been writing. And in the break of that day of the conference, I was called by a precious metals dealer, and he said, "Well, I want to offer you a job."
Yeah.
So I started working. Of course, I didn't know a lot about the rest of the gold market then, or economics, but I just felt like going for it. So that's how it started, and since then I've worked for a couple of billion dealers, and also for my own website for a small period of time, and now at Money Metals. So that's the history.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I have a kind of a similar trajectory. I was in the airline industry for a while, and then went back to school and ended up getting a degree in journalism. I did some sports writing, and then I just kind of fell in. I've always been interested in economics as well, and I actually have an accounting degree from my first foray through school, but I spent about 10 years being a musician and never used that. But like you, I don't have that. I didn't come up through the industry, and I don't have like a PhD in economics. But it goes to show that you can. In this day and age, it's very easy to learn a subject and become proficient in it because we have so many tools at our fingertips. So it's neat to hear that story.
Yeah. On the internet, you can also get lost, but you can also find a lot of information. I have to say, it took me a long time to find the right books and things. But if in my view, and it must be subjective, but if you just stick to logic, and you can figure a lot of things out. And I think we're blessed not to have an education, because economic subjects in universities would have probably told us that gold is not relevant to the system, or that's it's a bedrock, whatever. Yeah. And I just I prefer to have done my own study.
Yeah, I think it was Keynes that said gold is a useless relic. So that's kind of the mentality I think you get a lot in the mainstream.
Yeah,
I want to talk a little bit about what's going on over in China, and we had well over a year, like 18 months, of very aggressive central bank gold buying by the Chinese, and then in May. They suddenly stopped announcing any increases in their reserves. I'm curious as to your view. Do you think they've really stopped accumulating gold, or have they just stopped reporting it? What's kind of your sense of what might be going on with the Chinese central bank and gold?
Well, first of all, I think they have a very big motive to buy gold. As you know, they have very large foreign exchange reserves, and those are very sensitive to being sanctioned or frozen by the West. And they're all bonds or deposits or whatever they own, stocks, real estate is a liability. Well, real estate not really, but it is if you hold it abroad, right? But foreign exchange in general is a liability of another country, and so they have, I think, still like 3 trillion in foreign exchange reserves. They're the second largest economy in the world, and they're not the best friends with America. So right. And they have an eye on Taiwan. They see that as a province of theirs, and they support Russia in many political cases. So it makes a lot of sense for them. Because the war between Russia and Ukraine caused the West to freeze Russia's foreign exchange reserves,
Right.
and or at least the euro and dollar part of it. So of course they need to buy gold. I mean, this whole dollar story, which was good for the world up to a certain extent, or for a lot of people in the world, because it provided liquidity and it was extra credit, as you can say, in the international monetary system, and it provided growth, probably, etc. But now it's been weaponized, and China really needs to buy more gold to diversify. They say they have. Well, first of all, I have a different view on their official gold reserves. First of all, I'm really sure that they have a lot more than what they say they own. So what they say they own, I don't even recall. In the present, I think it's about 2,500 tons. What do you think?
That sounds about right. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head either, but that sounds like ballpark.
Yeah. So that's what they say, and I can remember in 2015. Since 2015, sometimes in a month they will tell, we bought 10 tons, 15 tons, whatever. Before 2015, they would come out every 8 years or so and say, oh, we bought another 400 or 600 tons, which was, of course, they didn't buy that in 1 month. So they just became honest, or they just communicated a new number. And this is all political, right? So first of all, China began growing enormously in 2001, and their foreign exchange reserves as well, because they kept their currency weak for an export-driven economy.
Right.
But as time went on, and also after the great financial crisis, this incentive, or the reason to buy gold became very big. But if they are honest in what they buy every month in the market, they would spook the markets, create a panic, and the gold price would soar a lot more than it is right now. Go figure. And of course, then you can, as a Chinese central bank, can buy less gold with your dollars. So they try to keep it a secret. Also, in relationships, in diplomatic relationships, buying gold is a bit of a, I don't know if I can say this, a little bit of a fuck you against America. America doesn't really like if a lot of countries buy gold. They've been waging a war. A figure, not a literal war, but there's been a gold war after Bretton Woods to get rid of the gold in the system, and it should have been the dollar only. So this whole change about buying gold is also sensitive for diplomatical ties. So that's how China's in this. So, but it's very clear, I speak to industry insiders. I always say I can't reveal my sources, or they won't talk to me anymore. But since 2015, I knew for sure that they had much more than they officially disclosed. I have my estimates. I think it's about, let's say, 5,000 tons at the moment. I don't have the exact number, and sometimes I get a little bit different information. But it's very clear, and it has become so evident after the war in Ukraine broke out, because in the last 2 years, you have the World Gold Council coming out with what central banks in aggregate buy.
Right.
So that number is like every quarter, it's like a few hundred tons, and on an annual basis, it's 1,000 tons, let's say. And then you have the official numbers. The World Gold Council numbers are based on field research, and it's also based on what they hear from their contacts. Then you also have what countries report to the IMF every year, every quarter. And those numbers between the IMF and the World Gold Council don't match.
Exactly.
There's a lot of, and I'm amazed by how many people just know this that these numbers don't match, but don't really go into, who's the secret buyer or whatever. Also because the society has become so polarized. So if you use the word secret or conspiracy or whatever, you immediately are pushed in one corner or the other.
Right.
But anyway, so there are very large covert buyers out there, and two sources have revealed to me that the People's Bank of China is mainly responsible for the secret buying that's being picked up by consultancy firms. Another one is Saudi Arabia, and I've done 2 articles on this. I've actually been able to prove how China the People's Bank of China buys gold secretly, and also for the Saudi central bank.
Right.
So that makes so I can make us very simple. Every quarter, what I do is I take the difference between the World Gold Council numbers and the IMF numbers. I take, the difference is then secret buying. I take 80% of that, and that is then secret PBOC buying in my guesstimate. 10% is, you can say, Saudi central bank buying. But also, I found this in the statistics. I found that every time that Switzerland exports gold to Saudi Arabia, that's probably for the central bank. So that's maybe a very accurate way to track those numbers. Anyway, I've in recent months I've written about all of this, and after that I haven't seen any. What I just said, like exports from Switzerland or from the UK. The exports from the UK to China directly were a proxy to me for PBOC purchases.
Yeah.
Since I have published my work, there have been no direct exports from the UK to China. So maybe they noticed my work and went underground again.
Yeah.
It's very possible. But in any case, that's how that's a little bit about the Chinese gold market. And or was your question about the Chinese gold market in general, or about the PBOC?
Well, yeah, about I was specifically asking about the central bank gold buying, and you and I are of the same mind. My actual follow-up question you've already answered, because I was going to ask you if you thought that the official numbers were representative of what they actually hold, and I've also long thought that they're understating the holdings that they have. And we're not alone. I mean, Jim Rickards, he's written about this. I know others have as well. But and also it's interesting because I picked up on the fact that, there's just unreported buying. And I've talked about the fact that it's most likely Chinese too. And it doesn't seem like anybody in the mainstream picks up on this at all. It's weird. No. It's like, it's so obvious. And it's like, why doesn't anybody talk about this?
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy because this is about, by now in the thousands of tons. And so that's very significant for what's happening in the world. I mean, a few topics in the world are very important. That is which countries have nukes, who has the gold, who produces the oil, who's energy dependent, right. Things like that. So it's strange that the Financial Times has become quite positive about gold in recent months, but they haven't written about this, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll just keep plugging away at it. Speaking of not very transparent, let's talk a little bit about the United States gold holdings. They've got supposedly a little over 8,000 tons of gold. And by the way, I looked, it is the Chinese official numbers is just under 2,300 tons. So okay. we were right there. So, but yeah, so the U.S. supposedly has 8,000 plus tons of gold. But do we really know that for sure? And Representative Alex Mooney has actually introduced a bill trying to force some transparency because it's pretty unclear what's actually in the vaults. And aside from the question of whether the U.S. gold is actually accounted for, there's also questions as to whether any of it's been pledged, leased, swapped, et cetera. What are your thoughts on what is or is not the reality with the U.S.'s gold holdings?
Well, I try to be very careful in these things, so I have no proof that the U.S. gold is not there.
Right. Nobody does.
No. Well, some people say I've read books that say they saw a lot of trucks coming out of Fort Knox at night or something. I don't know,
Right.
but maybe this was in the 60s when indeed a lot of gold was shipped out of Fort Knox to New York, to France. You know what happened in that era.
Right.
But so I have no proof that there's less gold in the vaults than what they say they have. I also have no evidence that the gold is swapped out or owned by other entities. It would be a bit weird if other entities, for example, leased gold and knowing that it is in the U.S. vault, so some middleman should be lying about that. So could be fraud then, but who knows? So yeah, my approach to it was very simple. I started many years ago investigating the audits of Fort Knox, but also most of the gold is in Fort Knox. There's a little bit in West Point, and the other one is Denver, I believe. Mm-hmm. And then some at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
Right.
So what I didn't know when I started the research is that the gold is being audited every year. And there's also a third-party auditor involved. That is KPMG at the moment. Mm-hmm. So on the surface, everything looked fine. Every year there's an audit report, and if you wouldn't know any better, or if you have no knowledge about gold, you would be easily tricked into, okay, this is totally fine. But I spend a lot of time sending freedom of information requests to the auditor. So that's the what's the name again? The Office of Inspector General of the Treasury. The Mint, which is the custodian, the Treasury itself, which is the owner. Who else? The Fed, of course. And I started to learn a lot about the audits. I got a lot of documents, and what's happening is that there are very famous images of a journalist going into Fort Knox in 1974. I believe it was September. And one compartment was opened, and they showed the gold, and everybody's like, "Ooh, wow!" As if a journalist can assay a gold bar, it can hold it in its hand, but it doesn't pass like an audit. But anyway, it was a nice gesture. And what they did then, what also a lot of people don't know, and by the way, I think virtually nobody knows that the gold is being audited every year, right? Uh-huh. I mean, so that's strange. If you have a lot of gold and you issue the world reserve currency, you would flaunt with these audits, right? And they don't. They try to keep it a secret. So that's suspicious. But anyway, in 1974, what they did is start a program from the day they opened one compartment. And the plan was to audit 10% of the gold every year. And then after 10 years, they would have audited all the gold.
Right.
The gold is in, let's say, 15 compartments or 20. So every year, a few compartments were opened. If it was all fine, the compartments were closed. They got a seal. The compartment would be closed with a ribbon with a seal attached to it. And then every year, when you audit the gold, you inspect the seals and the ribbons if those were damaged, opened or not. And the ones that were still fine, pristine. You didn't, didn't need to be opened again. And you can move on to the next compartments, and then in 10 years did all compartments. And the story now is that all the compartments have been audited, and all the seals are intact. And I have copies of all the seals, and there's a lot of information on the seals. And that's where it started, because on the seals, it says when the seal was attached to the compartment, but also what the prior seal was. And what I found out is that instead of, first of all, this audit procedure didn't take from 1974 until 1984. It took until 2013, I believe. So wow. They took a lot longer. They've paused operations. And the most astonishing thing, in my view, is that I have evidence that they have reopened compartments time and time again. Now, why is that? Right. So this is just hardcore facts. If you have, a procedure in which, you want to open the compartment once, audit it, close it, seal it, why open some compartments 3 times after that? And also, I have information about that 17, 18-year-old kids from the area were hired to handle the gold. A lot of mistakes were being made in the assaying, and that, they had to go back and open it again, and because they used the wrong scale, and, it just piles up and piles up. So again, I can't prove the gold isn't there, but that's all very, it's just not very credible, this audit. And I've also asked the auditor, can you explain to me why have these vault compartments been opened again and again? And then it can just, it could have answered, it could have explained why, but it can't. It doesn't. It chooses not to. Yeah. So I've also spoken to professional auditors, because this is not my expertise, of course. And they also said, well, what you've proven is that these audits are not credible. And even the ex-director of the Mint, I believe his name is Moy, has said, I had contact with him. I interviewed him. He said, yeah, you're allowed to publish all this, what I've said. Even he says it has to be done again. Wow. So, yeah. So, to make it really credible, and it has to be done again. That's my view. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because you when you start talking about something like this, I think a lot of people roll their eyes at any kind of conspiracy theory, and there's a lot of dumb ones out there, let's be honest. But the lack of transparency and the lack of proper procedure simply feeds the fire. And the best way to put out that fire, the old saying is sunlight is the best disinfectant. Come clean and show us. But that reluctance just kind of stokes the fire and raises the suspicion level.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, I mean, a lot of this information also was published. They published a gold bar list. I have to give it to them. The US is the only country in the world that has published a true gold bar list of their gold with serial numbers and everything. Mm-hmm. But this was done after the Gold Transparency Act. There was an initiative by Ron Paul, who wanted to know about, the audits and the whereabouts of the US gold. But, it says on Wikipedia that Ron Paul entered politics in the 60s or 70s, I believe, because of, sound money and gold. Mm-hmm. And by 2011, he wasn't even aware the gold was audited. So, this was one of the best kept secrets out there. Just amazing.
Yeah, that's why.
And I also have, I've been calling, of course, then the auditor, because at a certain point, who these people are. And I've even recorded phone calls, and they just hang up on me because, my questions were too sensitive.
Yes. Stop rattling the cage.
Yeah. It's just a strange story.
It's very strange. Well, let's hit one more topic real quick before I let you go. We've got the BRICS summit that is coming up next week in Russia, and a lot of chatter about it. I actually wrote an article today about they've released a document talking about some of the things that they're going to discuss. I think probably the most interesting thing to me is the fact that they're really seriously looking at an alternative to the SWIFT payment system, and as they would want to, since Russia's been locked out of it because of the Ukraine invasion. I'm curious of kind of what your thought is as you've looked at the international world of gold and the international view of the dollar. And I'm curious as if you think that BRICS is a credible threat to dollar dominance, or is it kind of being overstated by people like me?
Well, I read your article. I don't know what the rest of your thoughts on the BRICS are. I do think it's a bit overstated because a lot of people write about it and look forward to the annual BRICS summit. But the BRICS have been in existence for, I don't know, since 2009, and I don't really see a lot of, concrete things coming out of it. And every year they say, well, we have plans to think about ideas to set up a new currency system or whatever. And I don't really see a lot coming out of it. I think, also to set up a new currency, which they would all use also internally, would be, like the euro. And it took them 20, 30 years to set up the euro and think about it. And in the meantime, a lot of research reports, a lot of, so many preparations. And it was all in plain sight because this is a big operation.
Right.
So, and I'm seeing nothing of that. Usually Russia is barking a lot about, a lot of changes they want. And, but yeah, I always think, I believe it when I see it also because internally, some of these BRICS countries aren't really friends. China and India still have, border disputes, and they have a common enemy, which is, America and the West. And, that can be really strong. And I think it's good that they unite and talk about, a more balanced world, a more multipolar world. But I'm, for example, more interested in Enbridge, which is a bit, for people like us, first I had to get used to the fact that it runs on CBDCs. But Enbridge is a cooperation between China, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, the United Emirates, and what was the other one? Hong Kong. And they're really like, they did with the euro. They are, they have reached the minimum viable product stage now. So they're really working on this. Reports come out. They do tests. So something is really happening there. And there will be a system. And Russia could join down the line. India could join as well. I'm probably they will. But this is a system in which they can trade with each other with national currencies. And that will be, make the dollar not necessary in that. And, whatever they have in surpluses, they can store in gold.
Yeah.
So that is the, the gold recycling theory. So that is instead of storing your surpluses in US treasuries, that you store it in gold.
Right.
That actually is already happening. But they still lack, and it's very difficult to get, to get away from the dollar as a trade currency because there's so much liquidity in the dollar.
Right.
But those are, I think Enbridge is a little bit more interesting to look at than the BRICS initiative. But, who knows what comes out of it.
Yeah.
The fact that so many countries want to join BRICS is a sign that there's a lot of, let's say, they don't really like the West anymore.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of a good way to look at it. And the reality is there are a lot of people and countries out there who have a vested interest in, trying to minimize the impact of the dollar because they've seen what's happened to Russia. And, I actually did an interview with RT, Russia TV, back in 2018 when that was still kind of allowed. And I talked a little bit about the fact that the U.S. has a history of using the dollar as a foreign policy tool. And I talked about SWIFT in particular, and I got fact checked. And, and basically the fact checker was like, this will never happen. The U.S. would never lock anybody out of SWIFT. And sure enough, that's exactly what's happened. So I think whether it comes from BRICS or from some other approach, I do think it's undeniable that there is a movement globally to create other systems, and it may never knock the dollar off of its perch, but I think that there is an effort to at least create alternatives. And I'm of the opinion that any degradation of the dollar is bad news for the United States, given the fact that the U.S. insists on making so many of them. So.
Yeah. There are tons of initiatives. I mean, Russia and China are setting up their own alternative to SWIFT, messaging system. We have Enbridge. They're set up their own rating companies because that's also kind of a monopoly by the US. They have the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, all these replacements for the IMF. And, so it's in time, I'm sure they will get there, but it's, the dollar is just so entrenched, also with the euro dollar offshore dollar system, that it takes a while.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so folks can find some of your work over at moneymetals.com/news, and they definitely should check there. But where else can folks follow what you're doing? And are you on social media? Kind of where can people find Jan?
Yeah, well, I'm on X every day. I tweet a lot. I'm addicted to it, so that helps. No, I'm on X. You can find me. Yeah, I put out a lot of charts and news and my own work there. But the articles themselves are being published on Money Metals now. So have a look.
Yeah. Well, we're really excited to have you. It's good to have multiple voices out there, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm looking forward to working more closely with you as we move forward. So, and also appreciate you taking the time out of your day to chat with me. We had to reschedule this from yesterday because of my internet issues, and appreciate your patience, and look forward to talking with you more.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm looking forward to our next conversation on this platform.
We'll definitely do it again. Well, thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a nice day.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that very enlightening interview, and I certainly want to echo Mike's sentiments about our excitement to have Jan as a part of our team as we aim to bring you incredible market insights and analysis in the gold and silver markets. And that will do it for this week. Be sure to check back next Friday for next weekly Market Wrap podcast. And of course, you'll want to check out the Money Metals Midweek Memo each Wednesday, hosted by Mike Maharrey. To listen to any of our audio programs, just visit moneymetals.com/podcast or find them on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Until next time, this has been Mike Leeson with Money Metals Exchange. Thanks for listening, and have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Money Metals podcast. Be sure to come back next week. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast through iTunes. For answers to all of your questions, or to discreetly and securely buy or sell gold or silver coins, bars, and rounds, call 1-800-800-1865 or visit www.moneymetals.com. Our knowledgeable and no-pressure specialists are standing by to answer your call during business hours, Monday through Saturday. Or you can lock in your order online, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Again, visit us at www.moneymetals.com or call 1-800-800-1865.